If you take too much of testosterone, you can have side effects, mood imbalances, hypersexual function, an inability to sleep. Too much testosterone leads to a massively elevated central nervous system.
Jay Campbell is a 5-time international best-selling author, speaker, and longtime biohacker with 30 plus years of relentless self-improvement. He's the author of the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible. He is a powerful global voice in the conversations around health optimization and raising human consciousness, and he shares that voice on his podcast, the Jay Campbell Podcast.
If a person lives a fully optimized lifestyle, which is like living insulin controlled, exercising, combination of bone bearing resistance training with cardiovascular training, along with getting proper sleep, adding therapeutic testosterone is going to delay aging. When a man who's aging wants to understand what their testosterone levels are, they have to get.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Welcome to the next talk on the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity Health Summit, Live Beyond the Norms. I have a couple of speakers touching on the subject of menopause, and you may realize this, that doesn't apply to me, right? Yes, I'm a man, and menopause just doesn't, well, it may apply to me in understanding what my wife is going through, right? Because her experiences, impact me. The hormone decline associated with men's aging is testosterone. Testosterone replacement is an approach to manage this decline, and I wanted to bring in the expert and friend that I know to talk about testosterone loss. Jay Campbell is a 5-time international best-selling author, speaker, and longtime biohacker with 30 plus years of relentless self-improvement. He's the author of the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible. He is a powerful global voice in the conversations around health optimization and raising human consciousness, and he shares that voice on his podcast, the Jay Campbell Podcast. And not only is he going to talk today about testosterone, he is also going to talk about his latest passion, peptides. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Chris, man, it's an honor to be here, man. It's always good to see you and to talk shop. Let's roll.
Yeah, to get biohacking geeky. So before we jump into testosterone, talk to me about the path that you went through in order to really, that drove you to writing the book, the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible.
Yeah, for sure. As I was telling you, as you and I were talking off air, I think a lot of people have heard my story, so I'm going to make this very abridged. I was an ex-college basketball player. At 29 years of age, I was living in Southern California, and I was still playing pretty upper level of a men's, not professional, but call it semi-pro adult men's league. I got kicked in the testicles. I checked myself out of the game. And 6-7 weeks later, I started feeling absolutely horrible, run down, low back pains. So I went, at the time I was working for the Los Angeles Times, and I had a PPO benefits plan. And so I went through the PPO provider, and I got lucky. And as I always say, there's no coincidences, only synchronicities in the universe. The guy that, I saw said, "Hey, I'm going to recommend you to an endocrinologist because this shouldn't be happening to you. And I want to get some blood testing done." Now, Chris, this was in 1999 and people didn't really do that. So as I always say, it's kind of like weird, but obviously based on the path that I then since led or have since led, it was obviously, again, a synchronicity. I was recommended to an endocrinologist by the name of Dr. Raymond Scruggs, and he was a Harvard-educated guy. And again, this is totally random. And he tested my blood levels for testosterone, and I tested at like 260, 250, which at the time was the levels of like an 80-year-old geriatric. So he had said to me, "Look, I can put you on a dose of therapeutic testosterone and have you right as rain, but go home and talk to your wife." At the time, she was my fiance, and get approval and all that. So I did. And, my wife is a smart lady, and she was like, "Look, you're a smart guy. I know you take care of yourself and stuff like that. Let's see what happens." And so we did it. And I started using therapeutic testosterone. And exactly as he said, like 8 weeks later, I felt absolutely amazing. I went back in for my checkup with him, and he said, "Okay, let's go to take you off." And I was like, whoa. I'm not coming off this. This is life, right? Like there's absolutely no way. So at that point, he was like, "Okay, well, you're just going to have to stay on it forever." And, there's obviously, ramifications to that. I said, "No problem." So at that point, I was now 30, And I just became this very studious nerd, guy of looking into, peer review, published research. There really wasn't a lot. There was, unless you could read Russian and Bulgarian, there wasn't much out there. So I just obviously became very, very studious of this and looked into everything I could find. And over the course of the next 10 years, people would take a liking to me and say like, wow, you're in amazing shape. Like, what is the secret to your success? And I would tell them right to their face, therapeutic testosterone. And I would get one of two reactions, right? Like, ooh, steroids, you're, evil. Or other people, smart people would be like, wow, tell me more. So eventually it got to the point of like my closest friends who knew I was very passionate about this said, you got to write a book. And I was like, I can't write a book. I'm not a non-licensed medical professional. Nobody gives me any credibility to do it. So they were like, I reached out to Rick Collins, who's now a very close personal friend, who's a very famous attorney in the world of performance enhancement and all that stuff. And I said, hey, what would happen if a non-medically licensed person wrote a book on therapeutic testosterone? And I had a white paper that I had at that point too, that I sent to him, and he read it. And he actually wrote me back right away. That's why we're still friends to this day. And again, I was a total nobody at the point. And he said, look, there's always a chance that if a senator gets a bug up their ass about you writing this, that you have to hire me to investigate. Why do you know all this stuff? Right. So he's like, I recommend that, you just have that idea. So I shelved it because at that time of my life, I'm 41 years old. I'm with my current wife, Monica, and we have a successful residential real estate business. And so I didn't want to do anything to upset the apple cart. But I also had sent the white paper to Nelson Virgil. And Nelson Virgil was a guy who had written a book called Testosterone, A Man's Guide, and also Built to Survive. And he was investigating therapeutic testosterone as a man struggling with HIV, which at that time was quote unquote a death sentence in the world. And so I sent my white paper to him, and he actually got back to me like 2 months later after Rick did. And he said, I don't know who you are, but you have to write this book. This is profound information, and men around the world need to read it. So as I always say, stepping on the shoulders of giants. Thankfully, Nelson then coached me, mentored me up. I wrote the book a year later, which was turned out to be in 2014, not published until 2015 for some independent publishing fiascos. But since then, Chris, I've written 6 other books. I get a chance to meet all sorts of amazing people like yourself, doctors, researchers. I've done a bunch of lecturing. I've gone to a bunch of conferences. I've done a bunch of these things that we're doing right now. And, just thankfully, I've been able to just build this relationship and write all these books. And obviously now my website is very well traversed. People come for biohacking information. We're going to be talking about peptides, but all of this stuff came at the same time I was learning about using therapeutic testosterone. So, again, I'm completely, entirely self-trained.
That's it is the classic pain to passion story, right? Literally kicked in the nads, like that's the pain, and then to passion. So what a great story there. I've got a couple of questions, but I want to jump into testosterone because I do want to understand the thought process of. Well, first, let me ask this. So when you went to ask approval for your then fiance,
yeah,
what was the approval? Was it like he's going to be a rager? Because he's like, what, or is it just like, hey, this is a therapy and it's very cutting edge? And what did that approval look like?
The latter, definitely the latter. You got to remember this is in 1999 and nobody understood anything about using therapeutic testosterone. Whereas if you flash forward to today, it's like a very understood, many men use it. Many women are on therapeutic hormones. But at that time it was like renegade. And that's why he said to me, he was like, go home and make sure that your wife understands what you're doing, right? Because you're going to be injecting testosterone into your body and stuff. And like I said, at 29, I had never done anything outside of taking like Rip Fuel capsules from Twin Lab. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, this was a giant step for someone like me and really anyone. And that's, pretty much why he wanted to make sure that I had approval from my wife.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And in fact, the typical response that you got from other people, which was like, "Nah, stay away. You're doing steroids," is really kind of the reason. And you probably wouldn't have that same story today.
Totally.
Well, talk a little bit about what is the impact. So in your case, it was an acute trauma, right, that caused a significant testosterone loss. So you ended up feeling something that the rest of us males get to enjoy over a long, protracted process. What is the impact of declining testosterone on men in general?
It's like a life killer. I mean, I pretty much tell people that like the difference between being on using therapeutic testosterone to optimize your levels versus not as one ages is like the difference between being alive and being dead. I mean, the impact to cognitive performance, energy, libido, strength, endurance, better sleep, better body composition. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but it's profound the changes that a man will experience when they are using therapeutic testosterone. And again, in a way that allows them to optimize their levels and balance, just basically balance all of their hormones from a standpoint of utilizing testosterone to estrogen to progesterone and, various other hormones.
Okay. All right. So bad. This decline is a bad experience. How do you see testosterone's relationship with longevity?
So that's a great question. I personally believe, and I wouldn't even say it's a belief, it's more of a knowing that if a person lives a balanced, what I call in my world, fully optimized lifestyle, which is like living insulin controlled, obviously exercising, combination of bone bearing resistance training with cardiovascular training, along with getting proper sleep, adding therapeutic testosterone is going to delay aging. I mean, we know for a fact that muscle is the greatest deterrent to disease as one ages. And obviously having therapeutic testosterone on board allows a person to maintain a positive nitrogen balance as they age, which again will stem the tide of aging because most people get sarcopenia or deal with osteopenia, which are basically bone loss and muscle loss as they age. So having therapeutic testosterone on board will absolutely maintain muscle, if not actually allow you to increase muscle, again, depending on your lifestyle and your training habits, so that you can actually stem the tide. I like to call it age regress versus, experiencing the normal related, feelings of aging and signs of aging, which is, again, muscle loss and bone loss.
Okay. All right. So our testosterone is declining. There's a number of solutions. I remember having a conversation with a former NFL player, really just walking around my neighborhood, who actually co-authored a previous book with. He was talking about how deadlifts are one of the best ways to increase in terms of exercise, right? Increase testosterone. I mentioned I love sprinting. He goes, that's the next bet. Like it's deadlift and sprinting are two of the best ways. What are some other, right? So the first thought that a lot of people have with injecting testosterone is, okay, what are my other options? What are those options and how do they compare with actually injecting testosterone?
Yeah. So let me clarify some stuff. So what you guys are talking about, that kind of increase in testosterone is a transient increase in testosterone. That is not an optimization of testosterone pathways in the body, but absolutely lifting weights, sprinting, doing explosive movement patterns type stuff, fat. There's even, specific types of fast, infrared saunas. There's a lot of biohacking, quote unquote, adjuvants that someone can use I shouldn't say optimize, but to increase their testosterone, both free and total. But those are always going to only be transient. To actually optimize one's level for life, you're going to have to use, for most people, you're going to have to use some sort of therapeutic intervention or adjuvant. And again, the best form of that is always going to be therapeutic testosterone. Now, there are, of course, lots of people who sell testosterone boosting supplements. And obviously there is research out there that shows that some of these supplements, again, do increase both total and free testosterone, but none of them will increase it to a place where you can maintain that level over time. And so that's the biggest problem. And that's why I always say there's a lot of charlatans in the market that sell people and men, these quote unquote testosterone boosting supplements. But over time, you're not going to see an elevation / an optimized level that you can maintain. And that's why almost anybody who knows this business has been in this space, from physician, from researcher, whatever, they understand that really the only thing that's a tried and true solution is using therapeutic testosterone. Now, you don't have to inject it. There are multiple delivery systems. The system that I currently use is called transscrotal, which is essentially a cream that you place on the base of your scrotum in the morning. Some men will also put it on at night. It's obviously non-invasive. It's very simple to apply. People that have needle phobias don't have to worry about it and stuff like that. But that's becoming a much more prevalent delivery system for therapeutic testosterone. For women, obviously, women can also use cream. They now have oral capsules. Women can actually take an oral capsule of testosterone versus a man because the dosage that they use is so minimal. It doesn't really have any impact to hepatic function. So there's no, like methyl alkalization issue with it crossing through the liver and stuff like that. Whereas with men, they do now actually have a couple of oral capsules that are available for men too. I forget the names of the delivery systems, but when we see the research on them, we don't really see an optimized level. We just see a little bit above normal, which most guys will tell you that I don't want to be normal. I want to be optimized, right? So it really just comes down to the physician you're working with and then their understanding of how to optimize both male and female levels, again, through therapeutic interventions.
Are all of these, including the transscrotal lotion, are they prescription? Is that the only way to get them is prescription,
Sadly, that's a great question. Sadly, they are. But what's bizarre, and the fact that you asked that question is actually pretty relevant. And I think this is the universe lighting us up because I literally just had a conversation last week with an attorney who's involved in a lot of different things with the trans movement. And because there's so many people transitioning and transgender and all that stuff that's going on in America, there's a possibility that testosterone, which has always been a controlled 3 substance, has to be used or given via prescription. That law may be loosened/lessened. And so there may be a possibility that won't be the case anymore. So it's interesting that you asked that. And look, from a personal level, and as somebody who's been using therapeutic testosterone for close to 23 years now, in fact, in February, it will be 23 years. There's no risk. I mean, nobody's going to die from injecting testosterone or rubbing testosterone over the balls, or, women can place it on the hood of their labia or the inner thighs or whatever. Nobody is going to kill anybody from using therapeutic testosterone, right? It's a lot different than like some of these painkillers or some of these, opioid based drugs that can kill people. So it's like, we have to understand that there's like a big difference here, between like what can intend to harm and what can't. So, but unfortunately, to your original question, right now, the only way you can get therapeutic testosterone is via a prescription. Again, depending on what country you're in. Obviously, if you're in a different country outside of the United States or Canada, a lot of these things can be purchased over the counter in pharmacias, right? Like Mexico, Latin America. There are definitely some places in Europe too, but for the most part, it is a controlled substance, and you have to get a prescription from a physician.
Is that because I know in some cases, there's a lot of talk about metformin as a longevity drug, and it's typically a diabetes drug. And there's a lot of doctors still, and frankly, this is probably going to persist for the next 5 years or something, that aren't aware that it could be used therapeutically to address longevity. Is it challenging to get a testosterone prescription, or is that pretty straightforward?
No, and that's a great question. And by the way, I'm like one of the biggest advocates of metformin on the planet. The point that you say that is literally, to me, laughable that people still don't understand that. But yeah, but to the question, it depends. Like, put it this way: you can't go to an insurance subrogated doctor, right, an HMO or PPO doctor, and get testosterone. It's not their thing. Every now and then a person out there, who might be listening to this podcast say, "Oh, it's not true. I pay $20 copay and I get my testosterone." But most doctors that prescribe testosterone that know what they're doing are cash pay doctors. So if you are listening to this right now and you want to work with, and this is, by the way, it's not just for testosterone, it's also for peptides, really any biohacking, bioregulators, any adjuvant that is like, progressive, in what I would call the classification of optimized healthcare. You're going to have to work with a cash pay physician. And all those cash pay physicians, I shouldn't say all, but for the most part, are pretty knowledgeable about this kind of stuff. So as long as you're willing to go into that realm, you're likely, and again, do your research, do your homework. There's so much available on the internet today. You should be able to find somebody that can help you.
Okay, and it turns out, actually, I'm with my co-author of my recent book. I'm building out a webpage, Get Longevity Meds, with the intent of like having doctors who are aware, licensed physicians who are aware of the potential longevity benefits of things like metformin, and now I'm going to add testosterone to the list, because it'd be nice to just make a quick phone call, understand that you're not at risk, and then go pick up your prescription. That would
sounds like you and I have a bigger relationship coming with that, bro.
All right. right, cool. We'll talk about that. And you mentioned earlier kind of total and free testosterone. What's the difference there? What are you looking for? What are what's the difference?
A very important question, always the most important question. So total testosterone is just the measure of actual testosterone, both bound and unbound in the human body. And so as such, it's really a worthless number because the only number that matters is what is unbound, which is what we call free testosterone or bioavailable testosterone. So when a man who's aging wants to understand what their testosterone levels are, they have to get both free and total. Total is not really that important, but you want to see kind of a snapshot of what your total is relative to your free. But your free testosterone is again the amount of unbound, which again means biologically active, available to you. A lot of times you'll see this in the medical literature, or not medical literature, but in just documented people's lab panels. You'll see a guy who has 700, 650 in that range total, which is a mid-level or upper normal range of total testosterone, and have a super level of or super low level of free testosterone. And because their physician doesn't understand how to measure the two and the differences between the two, they'll say, "Oh, you're fine." When in fact, they're actually suffering from a testosterone deficiency. So again, free testosterone is always going to be the bigger and more stronger indicator of whether or not you are suffering from a testosterone deficiency.
Okay. And I can imagine if you're injecting, it's like subcutaneous, right? It's not intravenous, but subcutaneous, or even applying a lotion. Is there a spike? Are these designed so that they have kind of consistent free testosterone profiles throughout the day? How does that tend to work?
Also a good question. So if you're injecting, there's literally like 3 different testosterone, esters, right? So, and they're stabilized in different particulates and stuff like that. But there's like cypionate, ananthate, and propionate. And all 3 of those at the end of the day, this is what, if you asked this question, Chris, 10 years ago, I'd have given you a different answer, because what we now know is that at the end of the day, regardless of the ester of testosterone, it will ultimately molecularly cleave and break down to testosterone, right? So one ester, may be different from a half-life standpoint. One may be faster. One may take longer to cleave. But at the end of the day, all we care about at the tissue level, at the cell level, is that testosterone is cleaving into testosterone. And then what are the biochemical responses and cascades, to testosterone cleaving in our bloodstream? So, yes, some of the injectable preparations take longer to cleave. And then the cream is a much faster acting. In fact, if you use what I recommend, which is 200 milligram per gram Versabase or Atravaceous, there's like 3 or 4 different versions of the cream now, but it's 200 milligrams per gram. You have a half-life of about 6 hours. So a lot of men who use the cream, again, transscrotal, and you can place it anywhere on skin. You can place it here, inner thighs, but the best, most permeable area is the scrotum. In fact, there's scientific research that shows it's 8 times more permeable at the base of the scrotum. So that's where the best place to apply it is for rapid absorption. But there are some men that will use it twice a day, again, because of the half-life only being 6 hours, and some of them just being what are called hyperexcretors, where, they metabolize the testosterone faster than others. And again, as you know, and I know you know this as a biochemist, but like everybody is biochemically unique and individual, right? Mm-hmm. We're all N of 1. So some people are going to be faster burners and slash excretors of testosterone, and others will be less than.
Okay. And is there advantage of, cause my understanding is testosterone is instrumental in, like, while you're working out, breakdown of muscle, you get a peak of testosterone. And again, this is not optimized testosterone, but that tends to happen. So is there an advantage to doing injections some fixed period before workouts or some fixed period before bed?
No, I mean, it's a great question. As long as you're on therapeutic testosterone, whether it's a cream or injection, and it's in your body and you're taking obviously an adequate dosage, and, there is no cookie cutter dosage pattern or parameter. I mean, the average clinical therapeutic dosage is somewhere between 100 and 250 milligrams of injectable a week. And then the cream is, again, daily application. It comes in like a what do you call it? A toppy clip applicator. So it's like click, click, click. Mm. So most men are usually going to do 3, so I'd say 2 to 4 clicks either once or twice a day with the cream. But as long as you're using it, it's not going to matter whether you take it before you train or whether, you inject it before you train. Or, I mean, as long as you're actually on it, you will see the effects of it, being stronger. And again, having positive nitrogen balance.
Okay. And then can you take, what are some of the potential downsides, right? And can you take too much? Like what is it if if you decide to, quadruple your lotions, what are the potential impacts?
Yeah. So, I mean, like with all drugs, as I always say, I think Tim Ferriss was the one that said, way back when, the difference between a pill and a poison is the dosage. So the reality is like anything, you can take too much. And obviously in America, we like to supersize things. You know what I mean? Like if a little is good, more is better. It's definitely not true with testosterone. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about therapeutic testosterone optimization. We're not talking about bodybuilding and performance enhancements. Now, in bodybuilding and performance enhancement, they take 10, 15, 20 times the dose of what I'm recommending or what physicians recommend, again, who prescribe testosterone. So that's a completely separate world. I don't want to cross that world with this world, but absolutely, if you take too much of testosterone, you can have side effects. And again, the side effects that people understand are, mood imbalances, hypersexual function, and inability to sleep. I mean, the reality is, too much testosterone leads to a massively elevated central nervous system, right? So it's like if you ever knew a pro bodybuilder who's taking 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams of testosterone a week, it's very hard for them to sleep because their central nervous system is so amped from that testosterone, right? I mean, it's like you're thinking of like Prometheus, right? And Ridley Scott's movie, the big muscled Titan dude. I mean, how would those guys sleep? I mean, again, their central nervous system is so amped up, they have everything accelerated. But in the world of therapeutic dosing, which is what we're talking about, the side effects that somebody would see, and usually these are transient and they normalize over time, would be water retention. If the dosage is too high and their diet's off, you see water retention a lot of times in guys that have too much visceral belly fat. Some guys get nipple sensitivity. Now, it's important for anybody who utilizes therapeutic testosterone to realize, and again, this comes from Dr. Anthony J., who's a friend of both of us. He said, he didn't say, but he learned this in 2017 when they first started doing DNA testing and analysis. There's actually a gene that codes for gynecomastia. So gynecomastia is obviously excess breast tissue growth at the nipple area that becomes like a swollen tissue, almost like it's not a tumor, but it expresses like excess
puffiness,
glandular tissue. Yeah. And around the nipple area for men, and 60% of men have the gyno gene, right? So if you take therapeutic testosterone, there is a possibility of that gynecomastia condition expressing itself. There is no drug that can ameliorate that. The only way you can ameliorate that is actually to have a physician or a surgeon cut the tissue out. I am one of those guys that have that gyno gene. I have had 2 surgeries in my life. Again, I've been on therapeutic testosterone for 23 years to cut out all of the glandular tissue. The first surgery was in 2016, and then the last one was literally in May this year, right? So they can come at any point in time if you have the gene. And by the way, it doesn't just come out or express due to therapeutic testosterone. It can come out from a million different reasons. In fact, anybody who knows anything about gyno will tell you that there's like 1,000 different, environmental causes or factors that could lead to the tissue expressing. But it's important for men who go on therapeutic testosterone to realize that if they have the gyno gene, it could exacerbate that condition and cause that condition to come out. And more importantly, to not take drugs to mask the symptomology that comes from having gynecomastia. In fact, the only thing that actually is a permanent solution is to have it cut out.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast. Well, and I think that's a testament to one thing, right? And it came out in your initial story when the physician was like, "Hey, you had returned to normal. You got in your testosterone." He's like, "All right, let's wean you off of this." So one of my questions was like, "Why wean you off? What was his thought process?" And maybe it was just lack of knowledge, but what was his thought process in weaning you off of it? And then I think it just clearly it's a testament to going in for that surgery twice. I'm still doing it, and it's because the benefits are worth it. Like that's
Exactly.
impressive. But what do you think was his thought process of trying to wean you off?
So he was very knowledgeable about wanting to be on this for life because he was on it himself for life. At the time, I was 29, almost 30, and he was 54, and he had been on it for 16 years. I mean, he was very open with me and very, very transparent. But it was the same reason. Like you're 29. When you go on therapeutic testosterone, it can cause infertility, although it's very rare that it does. It can. And I just want you to be educated to the process and to the reality. And, once I told him that I would never come off, then it was like, okay, well, we got to move you to this other medication that I want to make sure you take because the other medication will maintain, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which are obviously the two hormones that will maintain, fertile sperm, right? Or motile sperm. And so anyway, that's what we moved to. But it was more of just like, hey, this is a lifelong process if you're going to stay on this and stuff. And so what he was attempting to do at that time was get me back to normal and then just take me off. But once I, experienced the benefits of it, I was like, dude, I'm not coming off this. There's no way.
That's not happening.
This is not happening.
All right. So now I want to know, because we haven't had a conversation since this kind of real shift has taken hold, right? You're really focused on peptides now. Talk about that transition from your focus on testosterone, and you're still doing testosterone, right? Like I think you right?
Of course.
And then now focusing on peptides. What does that journey look like?
So, it's a great question. So, along the time that I was biohacking myself, experimenting with testosterone delivery systems and working with different doctors and, doing all the research and writing the books and stuff like that, I was also obviously very, as I like to say it, at the tip of the spear in the biohacking realm, right? Like I tell people this and they look at me kind of befuddled, but I've been using peptides, Chris, since 2004. In fact, one of the first companies to actually offer peptides to men or women, if you were lucky enough to know about it in the United States, was a company called Southern Research Company. And they were in Texas. And what's hilarious is when I talk about this now, I get various random dudes, right, from outside all around the world who will message me and be like, hey, man, SRC for life, right? And I'll be like, instantly I'll know, oh shit, I got to talk to this guy because this guy was like one of them, one of us, right? Using these things back in 2005, 2006, when literally, bro, they were research chemicals. Now, when I say research chemicals, I want the truth to be known about this. And, I've been very explicit about this maybe once or twice in my life. So this is kind of an exclusive. They were not researched by any stretch of the imagination. They were coming out of pharmacies. Okay. And the pharmacies were just backdoor, making these things and selling them to quote unquote, what I would call the performance, at that time, biohacking words didn't exist, right? It was like underground forums. And the underground forums, and again, this is before Reddit and all that bullshit, but the underground forums were people like me, probably people like you, who were reading very advanced people's information about, chemicals and drugs and just everything that was out there that was considered not in the up and up that you could find on the internet, right? So it's I was in a lot of these underground forums, anonymously, talking to people, researching again, because there was no information, dude. At that time, you couldn't find anything. Obviously the internet was in its infancy. This is in the mid 2000s. And so all you could really find was just other people of like mind that were experimenting with these things. So I was using peptides literally to heal myself, to lose body fat, to enhance cognition. Everything that you could do, enhance immunity, improve my telomere strengthening. There were so many reasons I was using these things. And so then basically same thing, dude, late 2017, 2018, people were like, dude, you got to write a book on peptides. And I was like, there's not enough people out there. It's still very underground. Research is so underground. It's just not being taken serious by the medical profession. And then everything changed in 2017. Doctors peptides became mainstream in the doctor world, not mainstream, but in the health optimization space. And then in 2020, 2021, I was planning on writing a book, but COVID happened, and that kind of pushed things back. And so eventually I finally published my first book on peptides, which came out in February 1st of this year, on Amazon, called Optimize Your Health with Therapeutic Peptides. But I mean, it's basically just a summary book, and it's a very deep book. It's very well written. Like all my books, but it was just kind of a summary of all the articles that I'd already written on my website over the last 3 or 4 years about peptides, bringing them into the mainstream. Honestly, the truth is I think peptides has exploded into mainstream consciousness this year for one specific reason. And a lot of people don't really want to hear or talk about this because obviously it's kind of like a taboo subject, but people are looking for healing from the V. You know what I mean? I mean, there are so many people that were harmed from that, whatever you want to call that point in history over the last 2 years, that they're looking for alternative forms of healing. And obviously peptides and bioregulators present that opportunity. And so I think it was realistically going back to the beginning of this year, it was a perfect storm. My book landed on Amazon. There was one other book. There was Dr. Seed's book. And, Dr. Seeds and I are good friends. I mean, I was going to the peptide conferences in 2018, 2019. In 2020, the clinical world got hammered because TaylorMade, I'm pretty sure you knew them, the pharmacy, they went after the CEO. When I say they, I don't have to tell you who they are, but they went after the CEO and they took that down. And so a lot of the people in the peptides world, kind of went oh, we need to take a back seat. But subsequently, the monkey or the genie was out of the bottle, and people already knew how profound of healing agents these things were, from healing soft tissue injuries to healing traumatic brain injuries, to speeding, body fat loss, to enhancing all cause immunity. I mean, there's so many amazing things that peptides do. So physicians just kept prescribing them. And then, like I said, my book came out earlier in this year, and I think it was just literally like a mass consciousness event. All these people are looking for alternative forms of healing. They look at the medical profession in a lot of ways as failing them after what happened over the last 2 years. And dude, my book was just in the right place at the right time. And so, I mean, this year has just been this gigantic explosion of people coming to me and coming to my website for peptide related information.
So that's pretty phenomenal, right? So you've been using it a while. It's really coming on the stream. You got your book out. I'm looking at it here on Amazon, Optimize Your Health with Therapeutic Peptides.
Yep.
It's even with audiobook. Did you record I have to ask, did you record the audiobook? Of course,
bro.
What a pain that is. What a pain that is. Yeah. Just a quick story for mine. I'm recording it, and the first time we recorded, they were taking some video. I was like, hey, can we use this video? And they were like, no, we can't use the video because everyone is going to wonder why you can't read your own book. Right? Like to read a book into a microphone is so much harder than one thinks about. Right?
I haven't even done my newest book, which we can talk about, which is 30 Days to Shreds, which just came out a month and a half ago, and it's all peptides related stuff too. I haven't done that one yet because I don't have a studio. I mean, I just moved back here to Florida, almost 5 months ago now. I can't believe how time's flying, but I don't have an audio studio where I'm at here to even do it. So I have all these people oh, we want the audio version. I'm like, it's a book on fasting. Why do you want the audio version? Because we like to listen to you read your books, bro.
And it's true. Like that.
A lot of people listen. They auditory listen. They don't like to read books.
And then you create that relationship with your audience, which I think is good and makes sense. All right. Sure. So you talk about peptides and bioregulators, right? How do you think peptides and bioregulators impact longevity and health span?
Well, it's a great question, but let's take a step back. So a lot of things have changed with peptides in the last 3 weeks. Obviously, today is November 2nd. I don't know when this is going to publish, but today is November 2nd that you and I are recording this. And the FDA, as of September 28th. And then, the information kind of blew through the optimized healthcare space throughout all of October, has basically put or classified 28 peptides as class 2 substances, which essentially means known to cause harm or potentially unsafe, which is basically another word for them saying we're restricting the sale and prescribing of these peptides. And honestly, dude, we both know why. I mean, peptides personally, in next year will be 20 years I've been using them. I mean, they have almost no side effects. They work, right? So again, big pharma, this is peptides has their hand in the till, right? So it's like, we can't have those out there unless, and again, obviously there's always a profit motivation for those guys. They're FDA approved. So there are like 11 peptides right now as of last count that are FDA approved. And so you can use them. And of course, Chris, you know what that means? You got to pay 10 to 15 times the price of the compounded pharmacy peptide medication. So really what they just did was they just made a giant run on compounded peptides and basically said, hey, guess what? You are taking profits away from the FDA approved peptides by making the compounded versions, which obviously are lower cost and also higher dosage amounts. And so they just basically regulated them all. So it's a massive move and shift into the compounded healthcare space, which now will then focus a lot of the energy and effort and really just the focus on the research space, which is where I've always been, right? And anybody who was a longtime biohacker before peptides were even available in the market, that was the only way you could get them. But right now, there's no regulation of peptide space. I mean, of the research space. So it's a wild, wild west. So now you're going to have physicians, of course, their patients, other scientists and researchers all going into that space because that's the only place now that you can, technically get peptides. So dude, it's become a morass and I would say a mess in just the last 30 days because of this new ruling.
Yeah. Ever shifting, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's hop in real quick and talk about some of the peptides that you think we should get that are on your radar already, right? That, are they included in those 11 that are still available, or is anything included in the 28 that you're like, oh, damn, that's a really good one. And, I wish it wasn't there. Give us some profiles on a couple peptides here.
Yeah. So for sure. So all of the ones that they regulated are great. Of course.
Of course.
I mean, if they work, well, we got to restrict their sales. I mean, there are some that are FDA approved that are amazing. Testosterone, which is Grifta, which was originally created for men that were suffering from HIV, but it's a massive belly fat mobilizer. It's like one of the best peptides on earth. And again, it's called testosterone. Thymosin alpha-1, which goes by the code name TA1, is a profound immune modulator. That is obviously FDA approved. And the GLP-1 agonist, which, I primarily write a significant amount in the newest book, 30 Days to Shreds. Most of them are still approved because they are already FDA approved medications. Now, obviously, the research space sells a lot of these medications too, that obviously greater or just call it cheaper prices, right? Because again, it's research versus compounded. I mean, that's a whole nother debate and conversation too. We could even, not today to talk about that, but maybe at another time. But it is, dude. It's an ever changing, ever moving landscape. The peptides that they regulated in the compounded space are obviously available for research, but, just to name some, as you were asking, like BPC 157, TB 500, those are two of the most profound healing peptides on the planet. Anybody who injures themselves, whether it's breaking a bone or tearing a soft tissue, you can utilize those peptides and you can heal it like 10 times the rate and speed that you would from a normal standpoint.
So that's BPC 157 and TB,
thymosin beta 500. Those 500. Two together. Yeah.
And those are on the 28 do not use list.
Absolutely.
Is that?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And then, there's a bunch of other ones without getting into them. There's a bunch of cognitive enhancing ones, CMAX, Solank, Dihexa, those have all been regulated. Again, the other stuff that like helps with, not performance, but immunity, all of those have been regulated. Like Epitalon and Thymolin are powerful in extenders of telomerase, right? Which will enhance lifespan, and health span. So like those have now been regulated. So it's really, really crazy, like what's been done. But again, it's, the way I look at it, I just was at Runga, speaking 2 weeks ago. And I say that peptides represent crypto of healthcare. It's like a decentralized platform of like, oh my God, like I need to learn more about these because I can use these and I can completely avoid allopathic, quote unquote, sick care, illness medicine, if I learn how to utilize these various peptides. And if you want to talk about bioregulators, I mean, that's the next frontier because those are obviously Russian patented medications similar to peptides, but most of those, Chris, are oral capsules. They don't even need to be injected. They're tissue specific. They're side effect free. I mean, we really like to talk about them as kind of almost alien adjuvants because they don't really truly make sense in the realms of like understanding how, different medications work. I mean, most people are used to allopathic, prescription based drugs, which are petroleum distillate medications, which obviously when they break down into biological systems, they cause biological system side effects and symptoms. Whereas with bioregulators, they cause none of those things. So right now, big pharma / the FDA / any of the alphabet agencies is not regulating bioregulators because they're sold on Amazon, but they literally are drugs. They are medications. I mean, they are very powerful biological agents that can help people. Like, for example, bro, I'm literally using Libidon, which is a prostate
How do you spell that?
Libidon. And Libidon is a very profound prostate bioregulator that literally goes to work. There are 2 capsules. You take it like 2 capsules a day for 10 days in a row. And then you take 30 days off and then you do it again for 10 days in a row. And it literally goes to work in shrinking the male prostate. So as male ages, right, our prostate increases in size. I mean, that's like 98% of men. So this bioregulator literally goes to work naturally at shrinking the size of the male prostate as you age. It's insane.
Wow. Are there any other bioregulators that are, I'm sure there's a lot on your radar, but did you share a couple others?
Yeah. I mean, so Ventafort is a, vascular bioregulator. So dude, it literally controls blood pressure. It's phenomenal. I mean, think about it like this without blowing everybody's minds. Every single organ system in the human body has a respective bioregulator that you can utilize to optimize that organ system's biological functioning. So, I mean, it's truly amazing. Like, so there's one negative about bioregulators. There's only one supply chain in the world. It comes from the Kavan-Zinn Institute, which is Dr. Viktor Kavan-Zinn. He's a famous Russian scientist and researcher. He's really the guy that is the father of bioregulators. And so right now, Chris, it's very difficult as people become aware of these to get access to them. But one of my website and my team's biggest focus is moving into 2024 is to categorize all the bioregulators and then, hierarchically classify which one should be used in combination, which one should be synergistically used when you're dosing another one, and how often should you optimize biological system functioning with bioregulators. The only issue again is getting them out of Russia into the hands of the global population, because most of the people that resell them right now, it's very difficult to get access to them, and there's a massive drain on the supply.
Wow. All right. So this has been some amazing stuff on living a fully optimized life. I've got a couple of wrap-up questions. In terms of longevity, Jay, do you have a target age that you want to or expecting to live to?
100%. I do not expect to live a day under 110, and I would like to live to be 140. Now, obviously, I want to quantify that as like saying like quantitatively and qualitatively are 2 different things, right? Like for me, I want to be 110 and be able to like pick up my grandkids, or at that point, it might be my great grandkids, without any kind of disability. I want to be, mobile. I want to be functionally strong. I want to have good spinal strength. So again, it's more about like, how do I live longer, stronger versus just aging as a number. And, again, I'm already doing all the things. Like I know what my biological age is. It's like in my early 20s. I test myself regularly. I'm doing all of the, NAD tests now. So, I mean, there's so much out there if you're proactive to obviously, intervene and, as you said, become fully optimized. So I don't see any reason other than us blowing ourselves up that I can't live, to that long and be that vigorous and strong. And of course, as you know, there'll be more and more biochemical adjuvants and changes coming that will allow us to even optimize further than what we have now. So we really are right now in a golden age of biochemical advancements. You just have to know what to look for and obviously do your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. In Dr. David Sinclair's book, Lifespan, he talks about significantly, even beyond 140. Dave Asprey has set a target of 180. Sinclair is saying, hey, we've got the levers exist. If we can figure out the code, then we could live forever. Do you think we have an end of our lifespan, like humans can't live past 250 or some number, or do you kind of subscribe to David Sinclair's thought process?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I'm not a transhumanist, so I don't want to like put, technological innovations into my organic physicality. So I think that if you're a transhumanist, you could probably extend your life a lot longer, but biologically, organically, I would assume that these physical avatar bodies can probably go 180 to 200 years, there's going to have to be some sort of, intervention, I would assume, into the biologies. But I mean, I don't limit myself. I mean, we're obviously discovering things every single day. There's all sorts of, things that we don't even know about that we'll eventually discover. So, I mean, obviously the Methuselah effect, if you read any of the ancient research, they said that humans were living to 900 years, right? So it's like, does that mean that we can't physiologically? Is it something to do with some of our DNA has been turned off or detuned or something like that? So is it possible that some of those strands could be reactivated and then we could live longer? Absolutely. But I just think under our current understanding of our physical avatar bodies, I think that probably, I think what do they call it? The Hayflick limit is probably somewhere like in the high, what Sinclair says, it's somewhere between like 180 and 200 before your physical body probably becomes somewhat desiccated, I would assume.
I like the example, and you kind of saying 110 minimum, 140 if you've got the right physicality, like mental capability. I think
Sure.
a lot of people agree with that. There's an example, and I just used it in my book and pulled it off of a website. So it was a quote that talks about a candle burns until it goes out, right? And there's no like long delay, long decline, like It's burning like a candle does, and then it's done. And I think that's what a lot of people would look for. All right. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, can you share regarding longevity and a long health span?
For sure, metformin. I mean, I think that's probably becoming cliche. I mean, I've been on metformin for 20 years and I'm 52. I'll be 53 in February and I have a biological age of a little bit older than 22 and a half. And I know
which age test are you using?
All of them. True Diagnostic.
Yep.
What's the other one?
DNAge.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't used it. Yeah, that's DNAge. I used the other one. The gal I did a podcast with her. I forget where. Glycanage.
Yeah.
So, but the reality is like, how reliable are those tests? I mean, look, I think ultimately, and this is one of my adjuvants, it's, as you already said earlier in the show, it's mindset. What do you do to still and quiet your mind? Are you meditating? Are you introspective? Are you contemplative? Are you sitting in nature, drowning out the noise of technology and modernization that, literally destroys our ability to think and distracts us, enhances the monkey mind. So obviously it's metformin, sitting in nature, being contemplative. If you can meditate, obviously meditation is great, but you don't have to meditate, but you have to get to a place where you can still your mind. And then I would say number 3 is just, a desire a desire to know that you can extend your life and live as long as you want. You hear that statement, you're only as old as you feel. So it's like, if I, in my mind, desire to live to 140 longer and stronger, then in the same impact, I have to create systems and create a lifestyle that allows me to do that. And that lifestyle is obviously exercise. That lifestyle is living insulin controlled. That lifestyle is fasting so I can increase autophagy and hormesis. And essentially, again, just create those processes. And again, that all comes from silencing the mind and knowing that I can do those things. So it's really just a creating of a construct of like, I see myself living to 140 and now I'm going to go about doing it.
Literally the last half of the last chapter in my book talks about having that mindset. And it's really the mindsets that starts to say, well, quit smoking. Okay, that's obvious. But make sure you're getting the exercise. Make sure you're having those connections with people. So awesome stuff. Hey, Jay, how can people contact you?
So the easiest way is to get all my books for free. Go to jcampbell.com/free books. And you'll even get you get the first 2 chapters in the introduction of both of the newest books this year, but all my previous, international bestsellers, the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible, the Blowtorch Diet, Guaranteed Shredded, Living a Fully Optimized Life. All those books are available for free as PDF at that site. And then if you want to connect with me, obviously I'm on social media. My social media handle is jcampbell333.
jcampbell333. Okay, excellent. What in the near future are you excited about?
Man, just watching the world evolve from where it's at. It's sitting on the precipice of either a greatness or tragedy. And I think
that feels very true.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's like, but Chris, it goes back to like where you place your consciousness is what you get. So if you want to place your consciousness in the fear porn of the mainstream narrative and all the nonsense that's going on around, then that's probably where you're going to amplify. And if you want to place your consciousness on living to 140, or longer, and living longer and stronger and all the great things that come around with that, then that's where you place your consciousness. That's what I think you get. I mean, I really feel that we are now creating our realities through our thoughts.
Excellent. All right. You can find him at jcampbell.com. You can get his books for free. I believe I heard that correctly at jcampbell.com/free books. And then his handle on social media, jcampbell333. Jay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, it was an honor as always. I thought this was an amazing podcast. So thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.